Welcome to the English Epics channel, the story of Jillian for the 1000th time. I want to apologize, Tracy. I know we'll have another shower in Connecticut, but I would like to go to Georgia this time. I miss my oldest daughter's first baby, shower, a party for giving gifts in honor of childbirth or an expected baby, because I was attending the mandatory quarterly meeting at the home office of the insurance company, my agency, which is based in Connecticut. My father founded our firm nearly 40 years ago, and I was supposed to take over the reins when he officially retires in the next couple of years. And for the 1000th time, Mom, don't worry about it. The shower you're hosting in 2 weeks will come around soon enough. I can't wait to get back to Connecticut to see all my old friends. Tracy was driving me from her home outside of Atlanta, while my husband Chris was calling from our home in Farmington, Connecticut. I was in my hotel room in Charlotte, NC. We can't wait for you to come home, Tracy. How are the meetings going, Jillian? Chris asked me. As always, there's a lot of great material, and I've taken away a few key points to implement in the next quarter. But I don't understand why American Insurance insists that these meetings must be held in person. The meetings could easily be held online. The cost savings for each agency would be substantial. Like most large companies, they're stuck in their ways, Tracy replied, while Chris added, American Insurance has to justify the $15 million cost of the training and conference center they built just before the COVID pandemic. What are the boys doing this weekend, and why aren't they participating in our weekly family meeting? I wanted to know. The boys are resting at a cabin in Vermont. I talked to them last night. They're with a small group of friends. They plan to hike to the top of Mount Mansfield today, explained Chris. Still, being in Vermont doesn't excuse them from our weekly calls. We set up internet at the cabin more than 10 years ago. This is the 3rd week in a row they've neglected their family duties. If you don't want to talk to them, I will. Be my guest. Meaning the go-ahead, I don't mind, was Chris's quick and surprisingly sarcastic response. Before I could say anything, Tracy intervened and asked, Do you have anything interesting planned for this evening? Nothing interesting, was my reply. I've ordered room service right before our call. It should be delivered soon. After dinner, I'm going to bed. 4 days of meetings have worn me out. Darling, I'll be free tomorrow at 11 in the morning, provided. My flight arrives on time. I'll be back in Hartford at 3:40 and home by 5. Your itinerary is on the fridge. I know when you'll be home. Chris's response made me think that was 2 sarcastic comments in a row. I didn't say anything since Tracy was on the line, deciding to talk to Chris and sort everything out after I got home. It's time for me to go. My dinner will be delivered soon. I love you both, Tracy. We'll talk more during the week, and I'll pick you up at the airport in 2 weeks. Chris, I'll see you tomorrow. I only heard a see you soon from my daughter and a good night from my husband before both of their faces disappeared from my laptop screen. I admit I was upset when I didn't hear the I love you of statements that always ended our calls until recently. Maybe, I told myself, they're as tired as I am. Closing the laptop, I stood up, pulled the nightgown over my head, and tossed it onto the hotel bed. Then I went into the bathroom and spent a few minutes applying minimal makeup. At 49, with shoulder length, blonde hair and blue eyes, most men would consider me a very attractive woman. Chris constantly calls me a 10, but after 27 years of marriage, he probably feels he has to say it. Maybe I would have gotten a 9 the year we met at the University of Connecticut in our senior year of college and my 3rd year of law school. But age creeps up on you, and now I'd rate myself a solid 8 out of 10 and a sexy cougar. Standing naked, in front of the full-length mirror, I pulled the ribbon out of my hair and let it cascade down my neck. After I combed my locks with my fingers and shook my head, my hair looked perfect. I decided to put on the gorgeous little black dress. It accentuates my 38D chest and heart-shaped backside. My curves look stunning when the dress hugs my hips and ends 8 inches above my knees, and of course I'll be going without panties. The only forced decision is the bra. My partner wants me to be natural, but my breasts have started to sag. I think the black, sexy, sheer Victoria's Secret bra I bought specifically for tonight will be perfect. A few minutes later, I walk into the hotel. Restaurant with a smile and notice several men turning their heads in my direction. I see Ted at a corner table by the window which opens up to a view of downtown Charlotte from the hotel's 11th floor. Ted's smile turns into a radiant grin as I slip between the tables, making my way toward him. Ted Gleason was the son of the Herr, owner of an insurance agency that controlled the market in Cincinnati, Ohio. We met 9 years ago at one of the quarterly corporate meetings and became friends. 2 years later, I slept with him. And since then, at every quarterly meeting, we've become bed neighbors, having sex. Ted is married and has 5 children, all in their teens. Like me, he is on his way to taking over his father's agency when he retires. Ted is not bigger, prettier, or smarter than my husband. He's just 12 years younger than Chris and much quicker to recover so he can get laid again without wasting time making love. After my son was born, he had a vasectomy, which allows me to have sex with him without condoms. I've never had 3. Loads of juice flow out of me at once before him, and it's one of the most delightful sensations I've ever experienced in my life. Ted stood up when I approached the table, kissed me on the cheek, and held my chair while I sat down. "Is everything okay at home?" he asked. I'm a little upset that the guys weren't on our joint call, and Chris was a bit sarcastic. But overall, everything is fine. Tracy had a nice baby shower, and in 2 weeks she'll be back home for the family and friends shower with the Harringtons. "How is your family?" Ted stepped out of my room to give me some privacy for the call while he called. His family from a quiet area in the hotel lobby. "All the kids are fine, and I'm glad I'll be home tomorrow." Leanne was in a bad mood, but I think she's just tired from taking care of the kids. When he finished, Ted nodded toward the glass of red wine in front of me, raised his own, and with a mischievous grin, said to another great conference. When our glasses clinked, a 3rd chair was placed at our table right beside me. Looking up, I was so surprised by who I saw that the words just scrambled in my brain. Once seated, she said, "Hello, cheater. How was your room service dinner, Tracy?" Yes, it was a question, even though I was looking at my pregnant daughter's face. "Tracy?" I exhaled again. "What the hell are you doing here?" Her smile couldn't have been more contemptuous when she answered. "I didn't believe Daddy when he told us you were a lying, cheating adulteress. I had to come and see for myself." "Tracy, honey, it's not what you think." I forced my heart to slow down and tried to focus on regaining my powers. "Okay, cheater, let me tell you what I think. Let's see if I'm wrong. I think all you did was lie during your 38-minute conversation with your family. I think you sleep with that shit stain," she pointed at Ted, "at every one of your quarterly conferences. I think you crushed Dad. I think you've alienated your family. I think your parents would be ashamed to call you their daughter, and I think the chances of your grandfather's firm passing to you have been flushed down the toilet." When the tornado in my head reached level 5, Ted quickly stood up and announced, "This is a family matter. I apologize and will leave so you can deal with this situation in private." I didn't think the situation could get any worse until Tracy smiled and said, "I think a genius like you might want to sit down, shut up, and find out what kind of shitty storm he's going to face when he gets home to Leanne tomorrow." All the color drained from Ted's face. He turned as white as chalk. I'm not sure if he sat down or collapsed into the chair. Tracy turned to me and asked, "Is this what you like about this shit stain? He's a submissive idiot who does whatever he's told." The color quickly returned to Ted's face, which turned tomato red from Tracy's insult. He stood up, grabbed the table, and looked like he was about to lunge at Tracy. Tracy simply laughed and said, "Go ahead, shit stain, touch my body, pregnant. At 7 months, with even a single finger, and you'll go straight to jail." Ted immediately calmed down, regaining his composure, and Tracy continued. "Please order me a glass of wine. Shit stain, it won't take long." Tracy shifted in her chair and turned to me. She crossed her legs, folded her arms, and placed them on her knees. Then she continued, "I'd like to explain a few things to you, Mom. The reason my brothers haven't been on the last few family calls is because they believed Dad and realized you're a lying cheater. I don't know who cried harder that night when Dad talked to us and told us what you'd done. Jimmy, Johnny, and Dad were all crying by the end of the conversation. The only reason I didn't cry was because I was sure it was a huge mistake. The private detective's report didn't convince me. Dad didn't show any photos or videos, so I had to spend money I couldn't afford on plane tickets, a hotel room, and other necessary expenses to come here and see everything with my own eyes. Tracy, baby, I don't know what your father thinks he knows, but... Tracy's hand shot up like a police officer stopping traffic. Don't you get it? Dad has proof. He has photos and videos from your hotel room. He has proof that my mother is a liar. He has proof that my mother is a deceiver. He has proof that my mother is another man's toy. With much more confidence than I felt, and just as much fake bravado, I hissed. We will work as one family, and we will get through this unfortunate incident. My daughter, mocking me, rolled her eyes and placed her hand on her head, snapping her fingers. Immediately, our waiter appeared. Tracy turned to him and said, "Sorry, but I didn't call you. That was a signal for someone else." Tracy pointed to a tall, very well-built man who appeared behind the waiter. The man stood over Ted and asked, "Are you Mr. Theodore Gleason?" "Yes," Ted replied in a trembling voice. The man continued, "Mr. Gleason, you've been served." Throwing a large yellow envelope onto the table, he turned to me. "Are you Mrs. Gillian Harrington?" With tears in my eyes, I nodded. "Mrs. Harrington, you've been served." A similar envelope was thrown in front of me. With manic laughter, Tracy looked at Ted and said to him, "You don't have to open it." She pointed at the envelope. "I'll tell you everything inside. Leanne is divorcing your worthless ass. She will ask the court for your support in maintaining the household until your 3-year-old Pitty goes to college, as well as for the continuation of each of your children's education in a private Catholic school, and of course alimony." Tracy scanned the fashionable restaurant and continued, "If I were you, I'd savor every bite of tonight's dinner. I suspect you'll be eating noodles for most of the next 2 decades. Ted's eyes dimmed, and he hung his head in defeat as Tracy said, "Oh, Teddy, honey. And that's not all. You see, my father is a very smart lawyer. Besides getting rid of your juice," Tracy nodded in my direction. "His only goal is to screw up your life as much as possible. He's found a way to do it. Dad studied the prenuptial agreement, protecting your 25% stake in your father's agency. I take my hat off to your lawyers. The prenuptial agreement is solid. Leanne can't touch it." Smiling at Ted from ear to ear, she dropped the bomb. "Leanne can't touch your share, but my dad can. Claims for alienation of affection are not recognized in Ohio, but they are here in North Carolina, because you pushed away your wife's love for a cheating wife here in good old North Carolina. Your father has filed a lawsuit in Charlotte and expects to win the damn thing. Maybe he'll let you keep working as a janitor." Turning her attention back to me, Tracy smiled. "You won't be as poor as shit-stained Dad's splitting everything with you down the middle. According to the prenuptial agreement, Dad keeps his stake in his law firm and the lake house in Vermont that he inherited from his grandparents. You can keep your 40% stake in Grandpa's insurance agency. However, Leanne has filed a lawsuit against you in North Carolina for alienation of affection. She's going after you for ruining the lives of her 5 little children. Good luck. You're going to need it." The tears, which had started a few minutes ago, grew stronger with every harsh word from my daughter. The lump in my stomach threatened to burst out and cover the table, which was dressed in white linen, in vomit. The way my life had turned from a fairy tale into the darkest nightmare in a matter of minutes was beyond my comprehension. Tracy reached out and took the wine glass that had been ordered for her what felt like an eternity ago. Ted and I silently watched as Tracy took a few sips in the next moments, seemingly savoring the taste. When she set the unfinished glass back on the table, tears started flowing down her face. The tears were as heavy as mine, rolling down her cheeks. "I'm not going back home for the baby shower you planned. Please cancel it." Those dozen words were an absolute shock to me, and they amplified everything that had happened in the last 15 minutes tenfold. I could only stare with my mouth open as Tracy continued. "And I don't want you coming to Atlanta after my daughter is born. I promise I'll send you photos and updates, but until you get your life together, I don't want you involved with my family." When Tracy stood up, a figure appeared next to her. It was her husband and my son-in-law, Brian. He embraced HS's sobbing wife, held her close, and quietly asked, "Did you tell Mom the last part?" Tracy shook her head. "Tracy," he said in a loving but firm voice. "I can't," she replied. "And you?" Turning. "To me," Brian explained. "I may be wrong, but I don't believe there's a way back to Chris. Your affair has gone on for too long. There's a way back to your sons, to Tracy, to your granddaughter, and to me. It's going to take a lot of effort from you, but we'll be here when you become a different woman. We need you to become that woman." Brian leaned down and gently kissed my tear-streaked cheek before leading the still-crying Tracy out of the restaurant. A strange thought came to my mind as I watched them leave. I remembered the boxing matches Chris loved to watch, and I felt as though I'd taken an uppercut to the jaw and collapsed onto the floor in the center of the boxing ring. Chris's story, how I managed to suppress my emotions over the past day, and a half remained a mystery. I hadn't turned the sound off on my phone, and the calls, ringing and buzzing, had hardly stopped since Tracy met with her mother. Some messages were work-related. Most of the others, texts, voicemails, and emails, came from family, friends, and Leanne Gleason. Everyone was offering me support. The overwhelming majority of messages were from Jillian, and I immediately deleted each one. I had mixed emotions about Tracy's confrontation with Jillian and her idiot. From the very beginning, when I told my children about their mother's betrayal and her long-running affair, Tracy had been adamant that her mother couldn't possibly be that kind of woman. Since I had refused to provide the children with the full, private detective report and the accompanying recorded evidence, and instead sent each of them a brief 2-page summary, I had some doubts, at least about Tracy. Tracy and my son-in-law, Brian, hired a detective from Charlotte. He was able to gain access to Jillian in the idiot's room and provided Tracy with the necessary evidence. Brian called me and reported that Jillian had called. American Insurance explained that she was sick and wouldn't be attending the last meeting in Charlotte. They confirmed that Jillian had managed to catch an earlier flight and would arrive home around 1 p.m. the next day. I was preparing for Jillian's return. Our house was jointly owned, and I couldn't kick her out. It only took a few hours to pack up all of Jillian's things from the master bedroom and bathroom and move them to the guest room. I hired a worker and installed new locks on the master bedroom door and my home office. It wasn't much, but my divorce lawyer explained that I wouldn't be able to do more. I'll admit right away that I did something extra. It was very childish, but grotesque. In the same grotesque way that Jillian's quarterly sex fests seemed to me, I desperately wanted to leave Jillian a visual impression of my feelings. Every day, since Jillian had gone to Charlotte, I'd empty my bowels in the bathroom connected to the guest bedroom and not flush. There were 5 piles of shit that would have filled the toilet above the water line. I closed the bedroom door, but the smell still permeated the entire second floor. It made me laugh because, just like my farts, the smell of my shit didn't bother me. In fact, as I half-jokingly told Jillian hundreds of times, my waist smelled like petunias. Although I was prepared for the upcoming confrontation, I flinched when I heard the garage door open. I was sitting on the fenced area of our backyard. We had built a small barbecue and dining area, and to the left there was a large pool surrounded by a concrete terrace. Initially, I tried to green the area. The result was much worse than I had imagined, so I hired a professional. 7 years later, our private area, filled with blooming flowers and lush greenery, could have easily been part of a magazine article. Jillian and I took pride in being able to host outdoor parties in the spring, summer, and early fall. I heard Jillian call me a few times from inside the house before the patio door opened, and she stepped outside. She immediately noticed me sitting at the outdoor dining table and, walking closer, asked, "Can I have a beer too?" "Of course," I replied. Unlike any other time when she asked, I stayed seated and didn't offer my help. Almost silently scoffing, Jillian went to the outdoor fridge, found a craft beer, and poured it into a chilled glass. When she returned, she sat across from me, took a sip of her beer, and said, "I'm sorry." For a few moments, I studied her face. I noticed that she had recently touched up her makeup, but it didn't hide her swollen eyes. She had been crying a lot. "And what are you sorry for?" Jillian clenched her jaw in frustration before saying, "I'm sorry I hurt you, and I'm sorry I ruined my relationship with our children." "Liar!" Her nostrils flared as she leaned toward the table and hissed, "How dare you call me?" My body trembled as I smirked, and Jillian stopped. "How was your dinner in the room last night? That's lie number 1. How many more of the 10,000 or so lies do you want me to list?" We silently sized each other up, and each of us took a sip of beer. Nevertheless, she continued, "I'm truly sorry." An awkward silence fell again before I responded. "Fine. I forgive you." A few moments later, I shrugged and continued. "I don't care. You don't care about our family. For God's sake, Jillian, Tracy is married and living in Atlanta. She's starting her own family. Jim is starting his career at a leading engineering firm in Albany. John will graduate from Fordham University in June and has already told us that he's staying in New York and wants to work on Wall Street. We've done a great job, and our children are wonderful people, but they don't need us as much as they used. 2. "But we have to support them," Jillian almost shouted. "And we will. Each of us will support them as much as we can. Unfortunately, each of us will do it alone." Jillian tried to interrupt me, but I continued. "You were a good mother, and I have no doubt that you will continue to give each of our children the support they need. However, you cannot be a loving and faithful wife. I don't like you. I don't trust you. I don't respect you. I will fight the divorce," she declared. "Of course. You'll fight because you're a selfish bitch and you don't care about me." This time, the silence lasted for several minutes. Each office was lost in our own thoughts. "Why did you involve the kids so early?" Jillian finally asked. "I needed them to provide DNA samples. I had to make sure I was their biological father." Jillian's eyes almost popped out of their sockets, so wide were they. "You couldn't believe that I—" For the second time, Jillian couldn't finish her sentence. "I know for sure you've been unfaithful and dishonest," I said with a calm shrug. "I don't know when it started or how many others there have been, and frankly, I doubt I'll ever get the truth from you. But what I do know now, without a shadow of a doubt, is that all 3 of our children are mine. The paternity tests confirmed it." My laugh was completely unexpected. I leaned over the table toward Jillian. "Just so you know," I said to her in my most menacing voice, "if I found out that any one of our children wasn't mine, you'd be lying in the trunk of my car right now, and I'd be driving to Vermont to bury your body in the middle of the woods." My sudden statement stunned both of us, but it seemed to amuse my guest, who was coming out of our pool. The soft splashes and a raspy laugh made Jillian turn around. "What the hell are you doing here?" Jillian shouted angrily. "Hi, Jill." "Welcome home," Mickey replied with a smile. "Bury her. Where did that come from?" That was a rhetorical question. We both watched Mickey, I with growing appreciation and confidence, and Jillian with rising anger. Jillian and Mickey had been best friends since their first year at the University of Connecticut. They had lived together since their sophomore year, talked almost every day, and never missed an opportunity to meet up for coffee or something. Stronger every week. Mickey was a nurse by training and was currently the head nurse at Hartford's largest hospital. She had divorced her cheating husband nearly 4 years ago, and Jillian and I had always been there for her. Both women were over 5 feet 8 inches with beautiful faces and figures that attracted attention. However, they were quite different from each other. Jillian was curvy and voluptuous, while Mickey had a more athletic and toned body. Jillian was fuller-figured, while Mickey had a more petite, lean frame. Both had toned, well-proportioned bodies, but Jillian's figure was more pronounced, while Mickey was compact and fit. You might be wondering how I knew so much about Mickey's physique. That's a fair question. The thing is, Mickey had dressed with the upcoming confrontation with her friend in mind. She was wearing a revealing top, and her outfit, while sheer, resembled Jillian's lingerie. After Mickey stepped out of the pool, it was easy to notice the contours of her body. Mickey went to the fridge, grabbed a beer, and plopped down beside me, taking a few sips. "You told him?" Jillian screeched. Mickey took another big gulp before responding. "I'm ashamed to admit it, but it took me almost 2 days to decide to tell Chris everything, and another 2 days to arrange the meeting. I'm sure I did the right thing telling my friend about your betrayal. You damn traitor. We've been friends for over 30 years. Well," Mickey sighed, "all good things come to an end." After a brief pause, she continued, "I doubt it will make a difference, but Chris knew before I did that you were a disgusting liar." Jillian turned her gaze back to me. "Leanne Gleason told me," I explained. "It turns out your idiot gave his wife an STD. She managed to pull strings through family members and got treatment from him without reporting it through official channels. She hired a private investigator and stopped having sex with him. It didn't take me long to learn about your long-term affair with him, as well as his several other brief affairs with other married cheaters." Jillian flinched as I continued. "Leanne and I have kept in touch, and I hired a detective when you both attended an industry conference in D.C. last month. That's when I got the disgusting photos and video from my divorce attorney. I've been planning our divorce ever since." "When did you two start sleeping together?" Jillian asked. "You worthless pig," Mickey exploded. "Do you even know your husband? I wanted to. Oh, God, I tried to seduce him, but he wouldn't touch me, and he won't until your divorce is finalized." Mickey stood up, leaned across the table, and got as close to Jillian as she could before telling her. "Once the divorce is official, I'm going to have sex all day, every day, until he gets sick of me." Mickey turned to me, held out her hand, and said, "You promised me lunch, stud." Taking her by the hand, I glanced at Jillian one last time. I wanted to end our conversation with one final sarcastic comment, but all I saw in her eyes was pain and defeat. It will come as no surprise that Jillian ultimately kept her promise and fought for the divorce. The mandatory marriage counseling lasted 3 sessions. I participated because it was a court order. "There," Dr. Cohen almost begged me. "Please, I would like you to tell me about one thing, just one, a redeeming factor for your marriage." It didn't take me long to respond. "We raised and brought up wonderful children. Everyone was smiling until," I continued. "It's a shame that she hates her children so much that she destroyed our family." That was the end of our sessions, and 8 months later, our marriage was officially dissolved. I remember how, that night when I received the court's decision, I paced back and forth around the house. Around 8:15, there was a knock at the door. When I opened it, Mickey was standing on the porch, dressed in a knee-length coat. She quickly looked around to make sure none of my neighbors were walking their dogs and dropped the coat on the porch. Underneath, she was wearing nothing. Mickey and I were friends with benefits for the next few months. The sex was incredible, but something strange happened. I had considered her my best friend when I was married to Jillian. It seemed like we were missing something in our sex life, and our close friendship just changed. 4 or 5 months after, we started our wonderful but emotionally incomplete sex life, Mickey called me. "Hey, Stallion, can you invite a pretty girl to dinner on Friday?" I laughed and replied, "Your wish is my command." A few seconds of silence followed. I was already starting to think the call had dropped when Mickey said, "I'll bring my older sister. I want you to meet her. Meet your sister. I've known Jen for decades." I heard Mickey sigh and admit, "She's perfect for you, Chris." I heard an almost inaudible sob as she finished speaking. This time, The silence between us lasted much longer. Mickey's continued crying and my occasional grumbling made it clear that the call wasn't over. Finally, I made a decision for both of us. You can bring Jen, Mickey, if I bring a friend. He's perfect for you. By the time the waiter brought appetizers to our table, I was engrossed in conversation with Jen, while Mickey and Kevin had forgotten we even existed. Jen and I went out 2 or 3 times a week, and we met with Mickey and Kevin once or twice a month. I quickly fell head over heels in love with Jen, and from the loving looks of Kevin and Mickey, I could tell they were in love too. To top it all off, Mickey returned to the status of best friend. Mickey and Kevin got married in a traditional church ceremony 8 months later. 6 weeks after that, Jen and I followed them with a much more relaxed beach ceremony. We were joined by 6 children, their families, and a small group of close friends. I hadn't seen Jillian for 3 years. We met at my son Jim's wedding, and Jillian was there with her husband, Michael. 2 years later, John got married, and Jillian came with her husband, Claude. Unfortunately, Jillian's parents both died together in a car accident. At their funeral, Jillian's 4th husband, Anthony, told me that my eulogy was a great tribute to her parents. Thank you for listening until the end. See you in the next episode of English Epics. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Goodbye.